Good day and welcome to chapter number 10. Yes, we have reached chapter number 10, and this is another delicious chapter. This chapter's name is called Soups. Okay, I know some of you do like soups, some of you don't, but if you don't, you better start liking it because soups is one of the most important parts of the menu nowadays. Okay, so we're gonna start with chapter 10. Again, using the tablet, hopefully it keeps working without any problems. I've been having some issues with the software, but at the moment it looks okay. So whatever I see here on the tablet, you also be seeing on the TV, so you know exactly where I am. All right, so it says here the popularity of soups today may be due to increased nutrition consciousness, to a desire for simpler or lighter meals, or to an increased appreciation of how appetizing and satisfying soups can be. Whatever the reason, they emphasize the importance of soup making skills. Okay, so what they're saying is soups have become more popular in the last years, and this has put pressure on cooks to know exactly or to know better how to make soups and what kind of soups they're making. Okay, so in this chapter, what we're going to do is we're going to go through the different categories of soup, origins, and ingredients in which they make soups. But we're gonna see them just right now. It says here, soup, according to the dictionary, that's the definition that will come back in onto the final. Most soups can be divided, says here, soups, according to the dictionary, is a liquid food derived from meat, poultry, fish, or vegetables. Okay, so it is a liquid soup derived from meat, poultry, fish, or vegetables. This definition is alright as far as it goes, but there is a lot it doesn't tell us. If it is a stock straight from a stock pot of soup, is a beef stew liquid enough to be called a soup? We're interested more in the production techniques than in definition. Okay, so you know the basic definition for a soup right now? Liquid food coming from meat, poultry, fish, or vegetables. But we're gonna see right now, we're gonna dig a little deeper into the subject. We have different classifications of soups. Most soups can be divided into two basic categories. We have clear or unthickened soup or thick soups. Okay, so those major categories, two major categories, clear or thick. Okay, clear is what they mean with unthickened, and thick usually has one or more agent that thickens it up. Okay, this chapter discusses a number of special soups that don't fit easily into these first categories. All right, let's continue. We have a couple of questions, and then we go to the clear soups. What is a clear soup? It says here, a clear soup are based on a clear, unthickened broth or stock. You guys remember from chapter 8 what is a stock? Yes, it comes from bones. They put the bones in water, they blanch them first, they put them in water, and then they extract the flavor out of the bones, and then they make a stock. If they're using a meat part, then it would be called a broth. Okay, so a clear soup is based on a clear, unthickened broth or stock, and they may be served plain or garnished with a variety of vegetables and meats. Okay, the first category of a clear soup is what they call a broth and bouillon, and are terms used in many ways. In general, they both refer to a simple clear soup without solid ingredients. Okay, so when you're sick, your mother usually gives you a continental soup. You know, that's a brand, but actually it's a clear, unthickened soup made out of chicken stock with a little bit of tiny little like pasta pieces in it. But it's good for hydration and salt, so liquid retaining, and usually they use it with dietary purposes. So it's called a bouillon. Okay, so they do an extract in the water and it stays clear, bouillon. Then you can also make from the same liquid, you can add some vegetables to it, and then it would be called a vegetable soup. Okay, so vegetable soup is a clear seasoned stock or broth with the addition of one or more vegetables and sometimes meat or poultry products or starches. For example, vegetable soup, you can do a chicken vegetable soup, a beef vegetable soup, and for example, there's also this soup called minestrone, which is a vegetable soup, but it has pasta, and also sometimes you can put proteins in it, like a chicken minestrone or a beef minestrone. Okay, so it's clear soup with vegetables is what they call a vegetable soup. Okay, so that will be a bouillon with vegetables. And then you have the last one, and this is a very important one because a lot of restaurants use it. It's called a consommé. So a consommé is basically a rich, flavorful stock or broth that has been clarified to make it perfectly clear and transparent. The process of clarification is a technique we study in detail. Where do we start? The consommé, first of all, looks like water. It is very, very clear, but it's totally packed with flavor. So all types of consommes, the first thing you have to look for to call it a consomme, you know it's going to be a very strong flavor in the liquid. The secondary thing is it's going to be clear. Okay, so two things to look for in a consommé. Sometimes you can have a chicken consommé, a duck consommé, a beef consommé, a vegetable consommé. So these are all clear liquids with a lot of flavor into them. All right, so that is the department they call the clear soup. If we go to the thick soup or the thickened soup, the first one is called the cream soup. And the cream soup are soups thickened with roux or beurre meunier, which is a beurre meunier again. Remember what it is? That is a raw roux. And then you have liaison. Okay, still remember what's a liaison? Yes, that's egg yolks at the end. Or added thickening agents such as milk or cream. They are similar to velouté and bechamel sauces. In fact, they may be made by diluting and flavoring either one of these two leading sauces. Okay, so basically you can have a fish velouté, which is essentially a fish soup, fish velouté, or you can use a bechamel sauce to create a thick soup. Okay, so that has milk in it. Next one is the puree soup. This is as the name is, so it's a puree of any vegetable, like a potato and leeks puree, a carrot puree, a pea puree. So what you do is you boil the vegetables enough so when you put them into a blender, or if you use an immersed blender, you can puree them into a very creamy form, but they don't have milk or any dairy added to them, so that's why they call them a puree. Okay, so you have a cream soup, then you have a puree soup, and then you have the third category, which is called a bisque. And the bisque is a soup made from shellfish. So basically when you hear the word bisque, you know it has no fish in it. It has shellfish in it. Crabs, lobsters, and shrimp. Okay? So a lot of times when they say seafood bisque, it's a combination of one or two or more. When they say shrimp bisque, you know what it is. Lobster bisque is made out of lobster. Okay? So a bisque is a thickened soup made from shellfish. I was looking at this video today from Chef Jean-Pierre, very well-known chef, internationally known. But the problem is he made a butternut squash soup, and he called it a butternut squash bisque. And I was looking for the shellfish all over, and there was no shellfish into it. So basically what he made was a cream soup because he pureed it, and then at the end he added the cream into it. So it became a thick, delicious cream soup of butternut squash. It was not a bisque. A bisque, it was lacking the shellfish in it. Okay, so make sure you know what's a bisque. And the last one is a chowder. And the chowder is basically just like a simmering, like a solution, kind of like un stoba. But this, the chowder is what they call a hearty soup. It's made out of fish, shellfish, and vegetables. And although they're made in many ways, they usually contain milk and potatoes. Okay, so chowders usually they are whiter in color, not completely white, but they are white in color, and they have chunky, stuff in it like potatoes and big vegetables and shellfish and fish. Okay, that's a chowder. All right, so you have a clam chowder, you have a New England chowder, you have a fish chowder. Okay, so you know what's a chowder. Now we've seen different kinds of soup already. On the first page, you already have a bunch of definitions. You have the clear unthickened soup, which may be a broth bouillon, a vegetable soup, or a consommé. That's the clear. And then we move over to the creams. And the creams, like you can see, says here, you have the cream soups, the puree soups, the bisque, and the last one is the chowder. Okay, so these are the soups that actually we see the most. We have also some special soups. For example, if we look for sopa iwana, or if you look like on sopi di, let me see, sopa iwana, erta soup, those are specialty soups, okay? So those are only soups available in certain countries. That's why they call them specialty national soups. This is a catch of all categories of soups that don't fit into the main categories of soups, but they are native to particular countries. Like for example, in Germany they have the borscht, in Holland they have the erta soup, in Aruba they have the sopa iwanas, just like Curacao. You also have in Italy you have the minestrone. You have all kinds of soup, okay? And these belong to different countries, so these are called specialty national soups, okay? And then you have the last category is called the vegetarian soups or the low-fat soups. This is a new addition to the book. 8th edition already had it. 9th edition they keep going with it. It says here a great variety of vegetable-based soups are suitable for vegetarian menus. To plan vegetarian menus, review the categories vegetarian discuss on the next chapter. We're going to see this, if I'm not mistaken, in chapter 26. We're going to see about vegetarians, and then we will know what exactly do these vegetarians eat, because there's not one vegetarian, there's different kinds of vegetarian. Okay, so those are the different kinds of soups that we have to deal with. The clear soups, which there are 3, the thick soups, which there are 4, then the specialty national soups, which you should know a couple of examples, and then the last one is the vegetarian soup or the low-fat soups. Okay. Now, how do you serve the soup? If you have it an appetizer, it's between 6 to 8 ounces, so about a cup for appetizer. Okay. If you go more than a cup, what happens is people will fill up with the liquid, and they will not go all the way through the menu, all the way to dessert, because they're filling up. So that's why they say only use about 6 to 8 ounces for an appetizer. On the main course, you go a little bit bigger. You can go 8 to 12 ounces, so that's about 1/3 of that cup. You can add for main course, but again, it's got to be a main course, not an appetizer. Okay. And then it says here, when you serve hot soup, make sure you serve it in a hot plate. What happens a lot of times is people get a regular plate, they put the hot soup in it, but by the time the soup gets to the guest, it's already cold. There's nothing worse than eating cold soup if you're not if it's not intended to be eaten like that. Okay, because there are cold soups, but not all of them are like that. Okay, holding for service says here, strangely enough, some chefs would take the greatest care not to overcook meats and vegetables, and nevertheless keep a large kettle of soup on the steam table all day. You can imagine what the vegetable soup is like after 4 or 5 hours at that temperature. Okay, so what happens is when you make a soup, you have to make sure that you hold everything that's in it into its intended form. If you overcook it, it's going to be too mushy or too burnt or too strong. Okay, so that's why they say small batch cooking applies to soups as well as to other foods. Okay, the other one is consommes and some other clear soups can be kept hot for longer periods. Why? Because they're clear. Only thing is they reduce, they get stronger, they just add water, but they can be held longer because they don't have anything in them. Okay, and then you have the garnish. You have garnish in the soup. Major ingredients such as vegetables and clear vegetable soups are often considered as garnishes. And this group of garnishes also includes meats, poultry, seafood, pasta products, and grains such as barley or rice. Alright, they are treated as part of the preparation as a recipe and not as something added on. Okay, so that's part of the recipe. So if you add a garnish onto the, let's say a soup, it has to be served right away, because if it's a vegetable and you just leave it like that, it's going to wilt, it's going to look very ugly if it stays and it doesn't get served. Okay, so you have to make sure that you treat it or put it on it just before it gets served. Alright, and that's not just garnishes, it's also toppings. For example, you have a whole list of toppings here. You have, for example, fresh herbs like sliced almonds, grated cheese, egg yolk, chopped rice, eggs, croutons, crumbled bacon. They have to be put onto the soup right at the time that you're going to serve it, not leave it like for maybe half an hour and then serve it to people. Okay, so that's going to be a totally different. You also have accompaniments that goes together with the soup, but not on the plate, usually on the side. And these can be like Melba toast, which is actually kind of like a very thin cracker. You have also corn chips, breadsticks, cheese straws, whole grain wafers, and profiteroles. And profiteroles and papimento, I think they call them sushis. You know, the ones they put tuna fish into it, normally, or crab meat, they put them into it. And they're called profiteroles. That's their official name. Okay, so we continue. We go to broths. Again, we spoke about broths in chapter 9. What was it? Chapter 9? Chapter 8? Soups and sauces, stock and sauces. So it was chapter 8. So chapter 8 we spoke about broths, and we said that broths are made in the same procedure as we made stocks, but instead of using bones, we're using meat. Okay, so the difference between a broth and a stock is that the broth, according to the most common definition, is made by simmering meat. Okay, so that is the broth. What are we looking when we do a broth? We're looking for appearance. It should be clear, no cloudiness. It should have flavor and aroma that coming out of it, and it should have a texture. And broth should have a good body and not feel thin and watery in the mouth. Okay, so that comes from concentrating it. All right, so that is, any garnish should be cooked to the right degree of tenderness. Good. Then we have the next one, which is the consommé. Remember, we spoke about the consommé already. It's a very rich, clear mixture with a lot of flavor, and that's the consommé. It says as a clarified stock or broth. We're forgetting the most important part of the definition. The word consommé means literally completed or concentrated. Okay, so in other words, a consommé is a strong concentrated stock or broth. In a classical cuisine, that was all that was necessary for a stock to be called a consommé. Okay, so that is that. We continue, we go a little bit down. This is going to be a fairly short video because it has to do with soup. The importance about soup is classifying them into each department. Okay, so how do we clarify it? Well, you can clarify it in different ways. Hopefully the chef is going to show you in the kitchen how you clarify it by using meat into the soup. Also by using egg white into the soup. They can clarify, because while you add the egg white and while it goes solidifying, it will catch all the impurities and get them out. But what happens is nowadays they will put all the liquid into a big filter, and on the other side comes a nice clear liquid with a lot of flavor. So it's a lot easier nowadays to do a consommé than back then. Back then they had to do not only the clarification with meat, sometimes with meat, egg white. That's a lot of work. It's very expensive stuff. Okay, so nowadays they use, most of the time they would use a big filter. Okay. They also tell you what they use over there for clarification. Like you see here, you have the lean ground meat, you have the egg whites, you have mirepoix. They use that to catch all the impurities, and you have acid ingredients such as tomato products or beef, chicken, or consommé. They use these for clarifications. And then you have what are we looking in a consommé? So we're looking for appearance. It should be crystal clear. We're looking for flavor and aroma. Flavor and aroma should be full, rich, and well balanced, and a nice texture with a good body and a mouth feel to it. So you know it's a good consommé. The book also shows you how they make consommé. First of all, they put a big vat with all the liquid and the vegetables in it. They put it on low fire or medium fire, and it starts, losing color and extracting all the flavor. And then at the end of the cooking, you can see all the vegetables start floating, and the liquid, the very concentrated liquid, is on the bottom here. This thingy here is called a raft. Now, if you have to translate a raft in Papiamento, there's no word for it. In Spanish, they would call it a balsa. It's actually like a floating plank, what they use to cross rivers, a raft. Okay, so you have rafts also in food, but only in consommés. This thing here is called a raft. Okay, so if I ask you where would you find a raft, that will be in a consommé. Right? That's the raft. Good, we continue. We go a little bit down. What else do we have? We have variation of the consommé. Vegetable soups. Okay, in the next procedures, what they're gonna do is they're gonna start explaining to you how do you make vegetable soups, because we already been to the categories, but now they're gonna explain to you in more detail. Essentially, clear vegetable soups are made from clear stock or broth, not necessarily clarified, with the addition of one or more vegetables in them. Okay, so let's say we do like chicken vegetable soup, then we have to do a clear broth or stock, we have to do the vegetables, and then we have to use the chicken. We add those three together, and we have our product. Okay, usually they're prepared separately and added towards each other for a finishing product. Okay, now there's this difference. I know you guys have like a big auntie, maybe a grandma, maybe your mom, that they used to cook. They put everything in one pot and they make a soup. Okay, this is a traditional way of making soup. The problem with that is everything cooks together. Some of the stuff in there is going to be overcooked, and that's not the standard we're looking for when making a soup in a restaurant or in a hotel. We're looking for stuff that has appearance, so it looks nice, has all the colors, everything is well cooked, nothing is like, sloppy or just, just happen to be there. Everything must be planned to be there, okay? So that's why we do all those three things apart, and then whenever we serve them, we put them together into the plate. All right, so that's how we make soups for hotels. For example, this picture right here, there is a small problem with this picture. If you look at it first, the first thing you can see, if you have 29, you can see this has already got cold. Okay, so the soup got cold, and what it happens is they boiled it too much, so it's got a little cloudy, so it's not that clear anymore. It's supposed to be a clear vegetable soup variation, but it got a little bit cloudy in it. Okay, so you have to take care for this not to happen with you when you make a clear soup. It has to be clear. That's why it's called clear vegetable soup. You have to be able to see all the vegetables in it and not being so cloudy. All right, so the next one would be, this is called a piquant vegetable soup. So this one has spices. It's more spicy than usual, but on top of it they put some cheese on top of it, and this is some parsley flakes. You have green beans, you have peas, you have garbanzos over there. Okay, so this is Let me see whether, well, they have the recipe also in there, but it looks pretty. This is a kind of like a healthy soup. It's not vegetarian because it has cheese in it. So, but again, it's a very healthy soup indeed. We have recipes for chicken noodle soup and oxtail soup. Those are also soups that you might learn to make in the lab and also in the resource where you go do your internship. And then you have also situations for cream soups. For example, it says here, in the great kitchens of several decades ago, cream soups were exactly as we have just described. They were diluted, flavored sauces. So they made a sauce, they diluted with water or with some liquid, and then they made a soup. Okay, so that was back then. And then you have these things that can happen, like for example, curdling. So curdling is when, in Dutch they call it skifting. So what happens is that you throw something into the soup and it separates, it breaks down. And when it breaks down, you cannot put them back together. Okay, so that is not good. When that happens in the soup, you're done. You have to do a do-over. Okay, so curdling is not something you want happening while you're cooking a soup. It says here, because cream soups contain milk or cream or both, curdling is a common problem. The heat of cooking and acidity of many of the other ingredients are causes for this curdling. Okay, so when you're using creams or some stuff like that, you're not supposed to leave them on the fire for too much, because that will induce the phenomena of curdling, which you don't want in a soup. It looks very ugly and people are not going to be able to eat it. Alright, so when you use cream, when you use roux, when you use liaison, you use them at the end and just before serving. You don't leave them on the fire because that can induce curdling. Good. So when you have a cream soup, what you're looking for, it says here, I'm looking for a shiny surface. I have a distinct flavor of the main ingredient, not the cream, because what happens is a lot of times people will put the cream in it and then you lose the main ingredient taste. And then the texture has to be very velvety, you know, velvet, very smooth. That's the texture for a cream soup. About the consistency of heavy cream, not too thick, not too smooth, no graininess or lumps. Okay, so that is cream soups. Then we have a foot mill over here. You can see over here they put a foot mill, and in there they, they mill everything, and then you have a puree over here. And after they make the puree, then you can add. After they make the puree, you can add the cream. So before you add the cream, you have a puree soup, but if you add the cream, it becomes a cream soup. Okay, so those are building up the profile of the soup. You start with the vegetables boiling, then you put them into an immersed blender or a foot mill. You get a puree. You can serve it as a puree, or you can add cream to it, and then it becomes a cream soup. Okay, we continue. What else do we have? Different kinds of soup with recipes, which you're going to see in the lab. And then a little bit more down the list, we're going to see other recipes for soup. That's a pea soup, and then puree of carrot, puree of split pea, and then we get over to the puree of green pea soup with mint cream right here. It's going to show up in just a moment. And that is actually one of the national soups over there. This is the puree of green pea with mint cream. Very fancy, beautiful, nice white plate around it. Lots of flavor. And then we continue a little bit on at the bottom. We have chilled leek potato soup with a shrimp fennel. And why did I say chilled? Because this is a cold soup. Okay, this is a cold soup. A lot of people, especially in this side of the planet, we don't do cold soups as well, but they exist and people eat them a lot of times. So this is a chilled leek potato soup. We continue on the bottom, and then we go to bisques. And if you notice here at the bisque, what are they using? They're using the shells. This is the shrimp shells. They put them all together, they cook them, they extract all the flavor. And then after they extract all the flavor, they will add the fish velouté to it. And then they will get the immersed blender and make it into a cream soup. And then they will filter everything out of it. And what comes out of here is a tremendously filled with flavor and everything that was in those shells into a bisque. Okay. The last thing they add to it is some, you see right here, how they serve it. They add some cream to it, so it's nice and silky. You have some shrimp, real shrimp on the bottom, just for you to see what it is about. And then this is a very expensive dish, It's a lot of work, but I mean, talking about flavor, this has the most flavor of all of them because they were concentrated in the shells. They put all the shells on water. They extracted all those flavors and then they milled them together, you know, with the immersed blender, and that gives a lot of taste. Okay, so that is the bisque. The chowder. We don't have a picture of the chowder, but we do have a national specialty, and that is called the French onion. So that's one of the most basic soups that you can make. But don't mistake the word basic as being easy. Okay, it's basic because it's maybe one of the most well known, but it has a lot of techniques that you can use to make the soup. It's not just sauteing the onion, but it's sauteing with a little bit of red wine. You have to sweat them, they have to become transparent, they'll become nice and sweet. Then you add the chicken stock to it or the beef stock, and then you make it into the soup, and then you have to add the bread and the cheese and put it onto the salamander. Okay, so it has a lot of technique behind it. Other products are like this goulia right here, the goulias. Then you have southwestern corn and tomato soup. These are our specialty national soups. You have the seafood gumbo. This is the Chinese hot and sour. So this I had a chance to prove once. It is, like the name says, it's hot and it is sour. Okay, that comes because it uses a lot of soy sauce, and it has a lot of peppers in it too. Those are peppers. Okay, so those are this Chinese hot and sour. This I haven't tried. This is the tortilla soup. That's actually from Mexico. The color comes from tomatoes and chiles. And outside you have avocados. You have, I think that's mole, sour cream, and lime. Okay, you have, this is a new one. This is called pho. Okay, even though it's called pho bo, it's pho bo. That's how they name it. It's an extremely delicious soup. It's made in separate pieces. So the broth is made separate, the beef is made separate, the vegetables are kept separate, and it's only assembled when people ask for it. It's pho ba for meat. I think whenever it is chicken, it's pho ka, something like that. So, but it's I had a chance to try it in Holland. It's extremely delicious. I tried to do it at home. I got very close to the recipe, but you know, when you do it originally from the people who came up with it, it's a totally different taste. When they make the broth for these things, the broth takes about a day minimum to make, so it's very, very strong. It's not a consommé because it's not clear, but it has a lot of taste into it. Okay, so that's the pho ba. And then you have the gazpacho, and the thing about the gazpacho, even though it looks like a normal soup, it's a cold soup. Okay, so this is gazpacho, it's a cold soup. And then you have the minestrone. Look at this delicious thing right here. Has pasta into it, has tomatoes, has white wine, has some cheese, Parmesan cheese on top. And this is a full meal right here. This is a main course soup. This is not an appetizer soup. Okay, so that is that. Then you have caldo verde, more from Mexico. Haven't tried it personally. Looks kind of healthy. A lot of green for me. Actually, too green. But again, specialty national. Good. Questions for discussions? We go to the terms for review. Make sure you know these terms for review here. You have to know what's a clear soup, what's a vegetable soup, a consommé, cream soup, puree soup, bisque, chowder. We didn't speak about coagulation, but actually coagulation has to do with when you put the egg white into the consommé, so it starts cleaning up the liquid. So how does it clean up the liquid? Remember, when you open up an egg and you have the egg white, it's liquid and it's translucent, so it's almost transparent. But the moment it hits the temperature, it starts becoming solid white. And that is called coagulation. Okay, so that's coagulation. And then you have the clear meat. It's just basically just lean meat that they use for clarifying the consommé. Then you have clarification, which is the process of making it clear. And the last one is the raft that I explained to you before. So by doing this, we finished this chapter. This is chapter 10. It's a short chapter. It's about like maybe 30 minutes, but it has a lot of terminology that you will have to know. So make sure you go on it more than once and make more delicious soup from now on, so you know exactly what goes into a soup. And from here on, we think we see each other on the next one.